This morning when I woke up and chose the t-shirt for the day, I found an old DevOps Days t-shirt, and I realized that exactly 10 years ago in 2013, I was in Sydney for my first DevOps Days, which was pretty awesome. Back then it was Andrew Clay Schaefer. We spent a lot of time playing Werewolf. I don't know, is anyone here who was there back then? Oh, awesome. A couple of hands. It was just, like, I think from that day, I was kind of, like, it was, thank you. It might sound a bit biffy, but like, it was my dream to at some stage stand on stage. And I've been on at other DevOps Days, and this is now finally, after 10 years, I'm standing on the stage. It was a really cool moment for myself. So thank you for inviting me. What I want to do is, it is the first day, it's the first talk, so I'm not going to dive into, the black screen and Kubernetes and all that kind of goodness. I wanted to do a little bit on, like, a little reflection on the kind of the state of DevOps. I want to talk about kind of transformation in organizations, given that that's what I do, and give you a couple of insights from my journey. And then at the end, I want to leave you with like 3 different ways that you can look at how you can judge progress. So hopefully there's something in it for everyone, and then there's going to be a ton more technical talks along the way. And obviously very much looking forward to the open space to go deeper on stuff. So the thing with DevOps is, and I look after the DevOps practice in Accenture, I have restrained from changing the name because there's like every year there's a new name coming up. We should rename it to DevTechOps, or now you should really be this SRE practice, and now we need to do platform engineering. And honestly, guys, like, I think the whole idea of DevOps is we're here to solve problems, right? And all these things to me are just another bit of toolkit, right? And when you go to a conference like this, what you want to get out of it is another tool. Not to be convinced that your tool is the right one. That's not why you're coming here, right? You're not because you're someone standing on stage and saying, like Circle CI is a tool to use, right? You want to get a new tool. Like, you want to find something else, something new that you can take away. And for me, that is the awesome thing about DevOps. Like, we don't have as much of these kind of arguments of what is the right term or should we rename it. Like, we just add and add and add and add and add. Right? And I think these are all extra tools that are coming into the toolkit, which is bloody amazing. We already did the introductions. I'm not going to go into that again. I still love the community because it allows me to do what I enjoy, which is exactly this, like breaking down the silos and solving problems. Right? And if you do this, you have this internal motivation that, like, what bit of automation, what process can we improve to make life better? Yeah? And there's another community that is very similar, that is also trying to break down silos, but they have fallen, in my view, a little bit more into, but that's not. Right? And what I mean by that is, but that's not DevOps. Right? What do you mean you're just improving some engineering practices? That's not DevOps. DevOps is about being in the cloud, or about having a continuous delivery pipeline, or whatever. Right? And we really don't want to do this, because otherwise we're going to be in a situation like this. I know this is culture reference. I'm aging myself by showing this. So that's Monty Python, right? and to me, what I see when I go to Agile conferences is this. Right? It's like, but Scrum, no, safe. Scrum, safe. Disciplined Agile. Like, they're all the same. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, they're trying to convince you that one framework is better than the other, which is, in my view, nonsense. Right? They're individual bits that help you. Right? And if you go to, the great thing about Australia is we have an Agile conference, right, versus a Scrum conference and a Safe conference. Nothing wrong with those frameworks, but I'm glad that in the DevOps community we don't have this. Like, I don't see a lot of but this is platform engineering and you can't be here, or you're from the SRE group. No, you can't be here. Right? So to me, that's really what makes this community so valuable. Having said all that, I do actually like platform engineering. So I found this as one of the things that more recently has come up, and you would have seen versions of this slide before, I'm sure, right? But the differentiation between SRE as being more towards the ops side and platform engineering more to the dev side is, to me, helpful, right? Because I think one of the things that we fell into a little bit, and I've certainly seen this in many of the organizations I've worked with, is like the whole idea of DevOps is like we just put everything into one team, and that's the magic solved, right? It's like you change the org structure and the problem is solved. And reality is there are people who have more of a mindset of how to fix something, right? And they are more opsy people, and then there are people who want to build new stuff that are a bit more devy, and that's okay, right? As long as we kind of figure out how to support this. And to me, platform engineering has really kind of helped bring some of that stuff back. There's this really cool, I mean, some of you would have heard about CARMS. We certainly we in the DevOps community use a lot. I think this works, again, for platform engineering, which is nice. We don't have to learn a new acronym. And I've learned this from Manu, who is at Gartner. What we're trying to do with platform engineering is we want to basically provide a platform that allows things to be easier for developers, right? And the easy thing is make the right thing easy, right? And what you're taking away is the cognitive load of trying to figure out how to do things yourself, to build your own CD pipeline, to build your own test framework, to build your own environment automation. And so you get consistency through that as well, which are the two of the benefits. Automation, I don't think I need to talk about that too much. And then the next thing I think is really crucial, manage it as a product. I have been in so many organizations that created DevOps teams and platform teams and all those kind of things, and they saw this as a way to rule them all. Right? You know, my platform to rule them all. I mean, all the developers need to adhere to my standards. Right? That's not the point. It's a product. Like, these are your customers. Right? If they don't want to use it, there's a reason, and you need to learn. Right? You shouldn't try to convince them that your tool is the best tool and it's the only tool. It's like, these are your customers. These developers are your customers. So you need to understand that, right? And you really need to treat this as something that is your product. If they don't want it, you will be gone. Right? And I look in my company after our tools, and that's one of the things that I found extremely frustrating when people just tell me that, you know, their specific feature is the best thing in the world, and they can't tell me who is actually using it. Like, trust me, if I build it, they will come, right? And that's like very often not the case. And then the last thing is build security and governance into it, right? So, I mean, ultimately, that's one of the things how you sell this into your organization. It is a matter of if you're on the standard pathway, if you're on our platform, then you are able to go into production with a lot less hassle than otherwise, right? And make those people pay who are not using the standards and may have to go through extra governance steps, etc. So, and the reason that I wanted to do this little bit of deep dive into platform engineering is this is now a new tool I have. Like, it's a new way of describing something that I can use with organizations. And that's why I find it useful. When DevSecOps came up, it was a way of starting to talk about security more, but not to replace DevOps. It's just let us now also look into a bit more security. And obviously, it was at a time when we had a lot of cyber problems. All right, so let's talk a little bit about transformation. So when I started working in IT, this was the common model, and some of you would have probably gone through a similar situation where the best way of doing a transformation or any project is we're analyzing our as-is, we define our to-be, and to-be is basically magic, right? That's where we have, you know, zero-touch deployments, full automation, AI-driven deployments, ChatGPT writing all your code. That's where we want to be. And then the slightly problematic part is how do you get from A to B? Minor issue. But that's how a lot of projects work. Like I did when I started, I did all this kind of as-is, to-be, do the gap analysis, and what I'm going to try to convince you is that that's not working, right? And it was never working, which is why we ended up developing agile ways of working and others. And I'll make my argument by just saying the as-is, that's the easy one, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we know how good we are in our organization. We know what standards we use, what tools we have, et cetera, et cetera. Quite a few years ago, many years ago actually, from 1991, there's this book about software management. And what they did is they went to an organization and said, here's 100 best practices for quality. How many are you using in your organization? Right? And they went to the vice president, I think like 69% said, yep, we're using 69 of our best practices. And then he went all the way down in the organization. And when you get to the actual engineers, it's way lower, right? It's like 10%, 10 of the practices. Now, we don't know where our SS is, but we are DevOps, right? We have matured from this. This was 1991. Well, this is from the State of DevOps report from a couple of years ago. Right? Again, C-suite versus engineer. There's still 20% of differences between the best practices on DevOps when you ask the senior guys in the organization versus the engineers. Right? If you look at the Accelerate book, where they talk about, this is cloud now. Right? So DevOps is vague, but cloud, are you using the cloud? 67% say they're using the cloud. If you use these standards that the National Institute in the US, which is not the most forward-thinking technology organization, has defined as cloud, only 22% are actually using the cloud in that way. And that is just a couple of years ago. Right? So when people say they're using DevOps, they're using cloud, they're using whatever, they're actually not describing what's really happening. Right? So to do a transformation from an as-is perspective is very dangerous because you don't actually know where you are. And then you get into the transformation cycle, which is all you want to do, you have a problem, you do the transformation investment, and where you want to be is this to-be state. Anyone here has ever reached that kind of to-be state? No, right? It doesn't exist. Right? So all these people who have like a 3-year transformation program, you are meant to fail because there is no end state. Right? So all that's happening is you're going through this. Right? We're going up there, and then it becomes too expensive or too hard, so we change something and we stop investing, go back all the way down, then a new lead of platform comes in, we're going to start it again. Fantastic for consulting organizations, so thank you for doing this. But really what you want to get to is this, right? You want to get to this kind of ever-learning organization, and that is incredibly frustrating for executives. Because to tell them that this transformation is something that's just never going to stop and you're always going to get better, that's the equivalent of when a slightly overweight, middle-aged white guy goes to a doctor and all I want is that magic pill that makes me lose weight and get fit. I mean, how hard can that be? And what that doctor says is like, sorry, not Mr. Herring, like Master Smith, what you will have to do for the rest of your life is eat healthier and work out more. I'm like, that's not what I want to hear. I want to buy a tool. I want to buy a pill, right? This is why this is so hard. And this is why it's so hard to stay the course, because you have to continuously doing it, right? And that is why you really have to understand that this is not a magic pill. There's no tool you can buy. There's no DevOps in a box. There's none of those things. You just have to keep working at it. And there's no one pathway. Right? There is no one pathway. This is a set your own adventure. Right? I loved these books as a kid. But everyone is going to find a different way. Every technology is different, every application is different, every organization is different. So you have to pass your own way through this. But you can give some guidance, and I will talk about that a little bit later. I want to use an analogy. In this old way of thinking from as is to be, that's the equivalent of when the internet started. I mean, some of you might have used something like that. But that's a navigation software. You went on the internet, you said, I want to go from A to B, you got this map, you started driving, something happened, and then you're completely stuck, right? Because there's no way you can get back to your plan. Right? And many times that has happened to me. Right? That's the equivalent of what the old transformation approach was. What we really want is we have this kind of really complex map of getting through this transformation and making progress. And what we need to provide our teams with is a compass. Like a way to be able to navigate your way, to know where it's better, but not necessarily telling them exactly which steps to take. And that can be frustrating. If you're a DevOps coach or an engineer in your organization that creates these platforms, it is very frustrating for you to not just tell people what to do, but to explain to them how they get better and how they can leverage some of the stuff that you offer from your toolkit. But they have to make this way themselves. Otherwise, you're just going to give them this nice little booklet that becomes useless. As soon as this CD pipeline fails, they will be back at your desk. Right? They will come right back to you and say, pipeline failed, what do I do now? You haven't helped them. You created something for them, but you haven't helped them. Right? So you really want to create this compass for the teams that they can work with. And what can that compass look like? So I'll give you 3 examples. Yeah, and it's 3 very, very different examples. The first one here is something that I've used with many different organizations, which is basically give the teams some kind of guidance. And at the bottom is a bingo card, and we all know what good looks like. We want automation, we want infrastructure automation, we want test automation, we want automated deployments, we want to have engineers on the team that can maintain it. But you don't know for each team what their best next step is. So you give them the overall bingo card for your organization, and then you say, okay, which problem makes sense for you to solve next? Right? And you can help them. You can help with value stream mapping. You can help with deep dives into their technical issues. But these bingo cards will be filled out differently for each of the teams. At the top, you have something that I learned in university. Not sure what your experience was for those of you who went to university. I spent a ton of time learning something about how to build civilizations in the time that I was meant to listening to lectures. So there's this computer game called Civilization, and what you see on the left top is a technology tree. And the technology tree, what it does is, it basically tells you if you want to develop advanced science, then you need to first learn language, you need to learn math, you need to have like written language, and then you can get to kind of advanced science. Very similar for us. When we want to go to continuous delivery, we have a ton of different things that would have to get into that. And you see on the right-hand side, a similar technology tree for just continuous delivery. And again, it doesn't mean that you have to do everything in the same way, but you can choose anything on the left that doesn't have a dependency, and you can start doing that. And so the teams can fill in this technology tree by themselves, similar to how in that computer game, everyone fills in their technology tree differently. So that's one way of doing it. They're very technical, very team-driven. You can also help your executives, your team leads, to understand this. And this is what I use in our company to explain the benefits and whether or not they're mature. Because I get this all the time, right? There's nothing to see here. We are mature. We have DevOps. We have the cloud. Move away. I use these 4 analysis questions to just see how they react. Like if you are that good, like you have the cloud, you have DevOps, you're fantastically mature, let's blow away your test environments and just recreate them. And you're not actually going to get them to do this, but you look them in the eyes, and if they slightly sweat and get a bit nervous, you know they don't. They don't have that capability. Right? And the same is true for, let's just redeploy the application. We're not changing any code. I mean, how risky can that be? Just redeploy the application. Right? You can see people getting really, really nervous, like, no. I know this should be easy, but just in case. Organizations that they get more mature and they exercise this muscle, they will be able to answer these questions confidently. And if they answer them confidently, you move on, right? And then the last and perhaps most advanced way is, balanced scorecard. I'm an executive, so I need to have metrics. I came up with this because I wanted to find something that I can use no matter what the organization is. Many of you would have heard about the DORA metrics, and they're great. I needed something just a little bit more meaty because DORA metrics are extremely high level, and that means it's very difficult for you to influence them quickly. So you need to find a way to show progress. And I categorize in these kind of 4 different areas, and they all reflect DevOps in my view. Right? On the top left, you have business effectiveness. And the idea there is like if you have a good idea, we need to be able to scale this thing up very, very quickly. Like, so how can we do this? How quickly do we get to this point that we can scale out? I know how many experiments we can run, how safe it is, et cetera. So it's really to kind of experiment and then expand quickly. On the right top, you have perhaps the more traditional kind of platform engineering side, which is the delivery efficiency, cycle time, automation, deployment times, all those things. And the left bottom, you have more the ops side, so more the SRE side perhaps, which is about automate and react. Right? We want to keep the service running, which means we need to be able to, how quickly can we identify the problem? How many problems do we identify through the system rather than through a customer or a stakeholder? And then how many of the tickets or anything else do we have fully automated? And then you get to the right bottom, and the right bottom is the trickiest one. There's this really, in my view, a dirty secret about DevOps. Your architecture is going to define how well you can do DevOps. If you're working on a mainframe, and I'm working on a mainframe right now, that is going to be slower. Right? If you're working with a big packaged software application, again, it is not easy to do like a minute compile and deploy. Right? So the architecture that you have and the dependencies within the architecture will determine how mature you can get. So you need to measure your architecture somehow. Especially if you kind of start to erode that monolith, if you might have heard that term. You want to be able to show how much of your business, for example, is working on your new microservice architecture versus in your old legacy applications. Right? And so you need to be able to measure that. You can measure things like backwards compatible interfaces so that you know that you have more flexibility in the way you deploy, that you don't stop your whole business for the release weekend, et cetera. But that takes a little bit more creativity to measure the architecture. So 3 different ways of looking at it. All of them are contextual. Right? I mean, it all depends, unfortunately. But it helps to give you an idea of how you can measure things forward. For me, the most important thing about our DevOps is really that it's a kind of an ongoing journey, and it's one step at a time. What I would like people to do is take conscious steps, right? Not just the next tool. My CIO just came back from the Silicon Valley and found a new tool, and we're going to now roll it out across the company. None of those things. Like, really figure out what kind of experiments you run, test it, and then go back and say, okay, is this useful for us or not? Right? And so I'm still on that road. I'm still on that journey. When I started creating this practice here in Australia for our company, I did write in my targets that like in 3 years' time, everyone will do this and I won't have a job. 10 years' time, I'm still here, and I've now resigned to the point that I'm probably going to do this until I retire. And that's okay. I love solving technical problems. There's always new problems out there, and none of the tools ever being sold and sold in the future will solve all my problems. So join me on that road. Say hi if you see me around. I do have a couple of copies of my books if you come by and ask nicely. But yeah, thank you for having me. This is absolutely a dream for myself to stand here today after 10 years, and thank you for having me.